And back.
I'm back, everybody.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good morning. Get your coffee, get your morning snacks, settle in, get your committees up in here.
Yes, and share it to your Facebook groups. Hi, I'm back, Mitsli Hammer.
Yes, welcome back, Chief Mixley. Yeah, share, share, share. Make sure to like. Give us a like.
I'm back, Giovanna.
Yes.
Ooh, I'm back, Chief Sansa.
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody.
We're
Share it when you
so
shared it.
excited. How you doing, Chief Itza?
I'm good. I'm doing so good. It's a little early where I'm from, so I'm having a good morning. I'm like, I saw the sunrise today. I'm like,
Ooh,
but yeah, how are you? How are you, Chief Federico?
I'm good. It's not as early, so I got a little bit of sleep, but it's good. I'm good. I'm so excited for this. Land back, KW. Land back, Hui.
I'm back, everybody. Come on in the room. Come on in the room, and share it. Drop this in your group chats. Drop it in your Facebook group chats. Drop it in your committee group chats, of course. And share it when you shared it. And toss a like as you're coming into the room. I'm back, Sarah.
Yes, we know y'all like to be in those groups, so share to your groups, your family. They need this political education. We taking y'all to Hawaii today. Land back, Chief Dore.
I'm back. Alrighty, so I can go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Chief Itza. I am representing the colonization of Mexico, reconnecting to the Zapotec people of Oaxaca, and I use they, them pronouns. And yeah, Chief Federico, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, land back. So I'm Chief Frederico. I rep the colonized nation of Puerto Rican, or the colonized name of Puerto Rico, and I go by he, they pronouns.
Awesome. And we are reading From a Native Daughter by Hawanani-Kay Trask. So we're super excited to read this book. I am especially excited because to be honest, I didn't know anything about Hawaii. Like, lam back, everybody. Lam back, Emodi. Lam back. I'm back, Chief Ina. That's my leadership. Shout out to Chief Ina. But yes, I'm super excited to read this book because, quite frankly, I didn't know anything about the struggle about Indigenous people on islands. Like, I more so knew about Indigenous people on Turtle Islands because, that's where I rep. But I'm super excited, and just to see how colonialism is so pervasive around all colonized cultures. It's infiltrated all of our cultures and literally wreaked havoc on all of our lives, regardless of where we are geographically. So yeah, Chief Federico, why are you excited to read this book?
I'm so excited because I've just been such a fan of Dr. Haunani-Kay Trask for so long. Because there's such a revolutionary leader, and we're going to discuss, her more, right, and like her work within Hawaii. And Hawaii shares such a similar history. Obviously, what unites us as colonized peoples is colonialism, right? But for me too, it shares such a similar history to Puerto Rico, right? But what's so interesting about Hawaii is the fact that, it was annexed not that long ago, but yet, has become a state, whereas Puerto Rico has not. And, Puerto Rico has been the longest living colony in the world, right? It has been colonized since 1492 when Christopher Columbus decided to, step foot on our shores and everything. So I'm just so excited to delve into this history. I didn't know much about the Hawaiian history and everything as well. And this book, goes into all of that. So I'm excited to share that with my comrades.
Yes, absolutely. Alrighty, so we're going to go into our fundraising for Hammer City next. Yes, yes. Come on, donate to Hammer City. Yes, an anti-colonial city for all colonized people. Yeah, it's all people of color. It's gonna be and the beautiful part of it is it's gonna be completely different from the colony. We're creating an entirely new world. Like, there's gonna be no place for discrimination against nationality, gender, age, mental, and physical differences. We're gonna have, there's gonna be jobs. There's gonna be free housing. There's gonna be free food, healthcare. There's gonna be no cops, no pigs, okay, harassing you walking down the street. street. You're not going to have to pay 1 or 2/3 of your entire income to your, parasite landlord. We're going to have no coronavirus and no colonizers. Yes.
Yes, land back. Like, and we're also returning the land to indigenous peoples, right? Like, we have this whole Indigenous Land Council, the Liberating Land Council that oversees this project, right? And that's so important as we go into understanding Indigenous history, right? Like, why Indigenous people are true stewards of this land and need to have their land returned. And that's what we're building with Hammer City. And, we're not going to just stop with one Hammer City, right? Like, we're going across the entire world, and we're not going to stop until all colonized people are liberated. So donate.
Exactly. I know what I want to do in Hammer City. I know what I want to do. Yeah, let's get some donations in. Y'all don't want to be free? I'm ready to go to Hammer City. I'm ready to grow some food for my people. I'm ready to make some soap, maybe make some like fancy yarn out of like sheep wool or something and start crocheting with that. What do you want to do in Hammer City, Chief Federico?
I just want to be with my comrades. I don't know. There's so many things I want to do, like just to be able to have complete dictatorship over my land and my life, right? Like that's what I'm so looking forward to. I love dancing. I love just like chilling with people and like, I just imagine like us going around and like having these like campfires and everything, right? And just like sharing who we are, getting to know each other, right? Like so much more in depth, and then doing the work to then continuously liberate all colonized people worldwide.
Absolutely.
Yes. KW, 44 from a colonizer and 12 from KW. Yes, we love to see it.
Love reparations.
Yes. I mean, $10.
That is beautiful. Yes, Hawaii, PR, Guam, Marina Islands, American Samoa. We all islanders out here in the colony. $15 to Hammer City. Thank you, Sarah E. Absolutely. Yes. Thank you so much. Yeah. Come on, y'all. I want to be free. I know I want to be free more than anything, more than any tangible thing. I want to be free. Like none of us know what it's like to live a free, liberated life, So, come
through. We love to see it.
Yes. $5 from G Hammer. Come on through. G Hammer with that brilliance, with that coding brilliance and SciTech committee. Come through.
All goes towards Hammer City. We're eventually going to have Hammer Cities in the islands, right? Like, we're taking all the land back. Yes, from Megan, $20. Thanks.
Come on, Megan. Come on, Megan.
Yes, Tina, $15.
Yes. Ooh, come on now. I know you guys want to be free with these donations. Yes, because we have 200 acres, okay? 200 liberated acres. That is so much. Like, my mind cannot even begin to comprehend what 200 acres look like. Like, and we still have the entire planet to liberate, but 200 acres is a perfect start.
A beautiful start. And like the pictures of the homes that we're building and the earthbag homes and just like how communal they're going to be, like I'm so excited. They look so beautiful. Like just recently in the rally, how they laid out the plans, from the Indigenous land liberators, like reconnecting us to the earth, to our spirituality that's even planned out, right? Because like colonialism has even severed us from our spiritual ways and practices, which connect us to the land, to the sea, right? So I'm so excited. Donate.
Yes, full unity with that, Federico. Yes, $10 from Chief Haney. Thank you, Chief Haney.
Good morning, Sergeant Haney. Yes, next we're going to go into our trivia. But keep donating, please. Keep contributing. This all goes back to your own liberation.
Yes.
Liberation from colonizers.
Yes. Well, yeah. Also, if you don't have the funds, slide into a white colonizer's DMs. Be like, hey, you are a parasite to the world. Donate. Pay for some reparations. So yes, let's get into this book trap trivia. Alrighty, so what year did European colonizers from the United States invade and colonize Hawaii? Was it A, 1879, B, 1886, C, 1893, or D, 1901? Yeah, so drop your answers in the chat. Let's see. And if you get them wrong, you have to donate to Hammer City.
$10. If you can't get the reparations from a colonizer, hit up a colonizer friend, get on Tinder, swipe on a colonizer and tell them to donate to Hammer City.
Punto. Yeah, let them know, and really politicize that. Like, you have wealth, you have amassed wealth because of my resources, because you stole my resources. Ooh, okay, we got Alyssa with the first guess. A.
D from KW. C from Chief Ture. All right, what's the answer? It's a whole mix today. Chief Mixley. Some people, did y'all do the reading?
We're about to find out. And the answer is C, 1893. Yes. I think only Chief Ture got it, so everybody else better be donating to Hammer City. Yes. Awesome. Awesome. So let's get into our Read That Backs. Yeah, so you can drop your Read That Backs into the comments throughout the show. And we'll be reading those.
Yes. And I'm so excited for your Read That Back, Itza.
Yes, me too. Honestly, not to gas myself up, but me too. I am very excited. I think I really love the way Haunani-Kay Trask writes. She writes really poetically, and like, I don't know, it's very engaging. You know, initially I was like, "Ooh, what is she saying?" And then she twisted around. And I'm like, "Oh, okay, there we go."
At some points, yeah, you get like that little bit of liberalism. It's very nice and polite, and then she just goes off.
She's like, yeah. So yeah, you can drop your Read That Backs in the comments. Yeah, let's see if you guys. Yeah, I want to see some Read That Backs in there. Oh, Chief Ture said I had to do the reading. I did the audiobook. Yes, listen to the audiobook. The audiobook is incredible. The thespian really jumped out. Like, the dramatic reading was everything. I loved it. Yes. Alrighty, so let's get into that Read That Back. It's on page 18. It goes through page 19. Alrighty, so finally, there is always that particular variant of racism that fashions America's moral stupidity. Vociferous denial of the presence, unique histories, and self-determination of America's conquered natives. To Hawaiians, the Haole Americans seem to cherish their ignorance of other nations, especially conquered peoples who live wretched lives around them, as a sign of American individualism. Americans have no cultural beliefs that connect them, as a people or nation, to other human beings or to the natural world as brothers and sisters in a familial cosmos. Therefore, peoples who suffer and die in the third world, for example, or on Indian reservations, either deserve their fate or are unfortunate outcasts in a world that finds white people at the top. From a Hawaiian perspective, this is not only incorrect, but unbelievably cruel to family members. In colony Hawaii, not only the cruelty, but the stench of colonialism is everywhere. At Pearl Harbor, so thoroughly polluted by the American military that it now ranks among the top priorities in the Environmental Protection Agency's Superfund list. At Waikiki, one of the most famous beaches in the world, where human excrement from the overloaded Honolulu sewer system floats just offshore. At Honolulu International Airport, where jet fuel from commercial, military, and private planes creates an eternal pale in the hot, still air. In the magnificent valleys and plains of all major islands, where heavy pesticides, herbicide use on sugar plantations, and mammoth golf course result in contaminations of wetlands, rivers, estuaries, bays, and of course, groundwater sources. In the gridlock freeways, which swallow up more and more land as the American way of life carves its path towards destruction. In the schools and businesses and hotels and shops and government buildings, and on the radio and television, where Christian American values of capitalism, racism, and violent conflict are upheld, supported, and deployed against the native people. This is Hawaii, once the most fragile and precious of sacred places, now transformed by the American behemoth into a dying land. Only a whispering spirit remains. Oh my God. I just need to marinate in that, like.
Yeah, Sante says the stench of colonialism everywhere.
Everywhere. And not only like literally physically everywhere in Hawaii, but everywhere in the planet globally. Like, the stench of colonialism is everywhere. And I really, really wanted to just highlight the fact that this really outlines our third principle of unity, that colonizers are colonialism is the root of evil, and the violence perpetrated at the hands of the white colonizers are the reasons why we are in the state that we live in such despair and such loss and such just immense loss that we cannot even comprehend. Not only the loss of our ancestors, the violent, like, just pillaging of our lands, but it's just really unfathomable. But I also wanted to highlight, like, initially, Haunani-Kay Trask outlines, like, oh, they're just ignorant, they just don't know. But she really quickly turns that around. Is like, no, they know what they're doing. They know exactly what they're doing. The violence they perpetrate is intentional. It is completely by design. And yeah, I just really, really unite with this, and unite with the fact that colonialism is like literally the root of all evil. Like, you are a parasite. You are a parasite unto all colonized people everywhere, especially, and specifically the people of Hawaii, in this passage. So yeah, let me know what you think, Chief Federico. What do you think about this? Read that back.
Yes, land back, full unity. It just really shows our principle of unity, number three, that all the problems we face come from colonialism, right? And that's what Dr. Haunani-Kay Trask is laying out, just the horrible devastation that has resulted from just less than like 200 years of colonialism, right? Like, it hasn't even been that long since the United States has annexed Hawaii and really done this horrific devastation to the Hawaiian population. Like 97% of their population wiped out, through disease, through conquest, through killing, through blood quantum, right? Which says like, oh, you're not native enough, and then they remove you from the native population. And it really goes to show, right? Like, just how horrific this devastation has been, and then also the tourist industry and colonialism. And we discussed this before, right? Like, you had laid out in our conversation before, like, would indigenous Hawaiians pre-colonialism ever allow human excrement into their water? Into their water. All of these horrific things, like, who lives like that? You know what I mean? And we know, like, in Europe, pre-colonialism, like, Europeans were literally throwing their feces just onto the street and into their water, right? And that's what they were drinking, and then they brought all this disease here. But like, indigenous people never lived like that. Yes, Europe's been pooping in their water for centuries. Who lives like that, Indigenous Hawaiians never lived like that, because they were connected to the land, to the sea, like aloha aina, which like Dr. Haunani-Kay Trask also lays out, is like this love of the land, and then also they're people of the sea, right? Like, so I unite with this so much, because it really goes to show like just this horrific devastation and why we're united, and why we have and are working to build Hammer City and are not going to stop until all colonized peoples are liberated from this hell.
The full unity, Chief Federico. Yeah, you better lay that out. Perfect. Yeah, and I also wanted to add, like we were saying, like, indigenous people, we are so connected to the lands. You have to, colonizers literally had to detach themselves from humanity in order to, go on this rampage onto the entire non-white world. Like, what a disgusting, vile beast you have to be to, like, rape, pillage, and genocide an entire people. Like, you stole land that's soaked with the blood of our ancestors. Like, you are less than human. You're a beast. And they clearly show by the way that they live, they have no connection to other people, but also to the land. They not only do they commit genocide, but they commit ecocide. They murder all life, all life that they don't value as their own, because they don't value life. So yeah, full unity with what you laid out, Chief Federico. Yes.
Yeah. Chief, am I gonna slaughter this name? Watakame says, like, y'all laying it out, those whites are filthy. Yes. And then I saw Minister Zine put up a great comment, right? They literally still do all of this. They're poisoning the water and land to murder colonized people in our land to this day. And that's exactly what it is, and Dr. Haunani-Kay Trask goes on to lay it out too, like this whole contradiction around nuclear submarines circulating around the Pacific, right? And all of this poisoning that comes from the radiation and from this nuclear testing that results from it, and how stupid Europeans are, right? And like how invincible that they somehow think that they are, because they also visit these lands, right, for romantic holidays and trips, and participate in tourist colonialism, yet they're still poisoning the land and water there, and it's really like make it make sense, because it just does not. But like, and they have this whole thing too where like they're like, oh, like, if a nuclear holocaust happens, we'll be fine, we've survived before things like this. Like, what? Yes, the way they treat our land, animals, everything. It's so horrific. That's why y'all got to contribute to Hammer City so we can get the land back.
Yes. So Chief SG Anko said, yes, white people detach themselves from humanity to justify the complete destruction of the earth and the people who live on it. Punto. That is it. Like, literally everything that they have done, like, literally proves that. Like, they do not value life, and they have to, like, not value life in order to just wreak havoc everything. There is not one thing that has not been touched by colonialism. Not one. Yes.
Exactly. And that's why too we understand like the relationship of the world is like you come into it as like the colonized or the colonizer, right? And you can only be the colonizer if you benefit from the colonial structure, right? And in what way can colonized peoples ever benefit from it? When our lands are raped, pillaged, and destroyed, right? Like this, and like we understand who are the colonizers, right? Because like it's a material relationship to the world, and that's also what Dr. Haunani-Kay Trask is laying out, like is laying out who the hell the colonizer is.
Yes, full unity, full unity. Yes. So to reiterate, we are reading from A Native Daughter by the brilliant Dr. Hawai'i-Kay Trask. Hawai'i-Kay Trask, excuse me. Yeah. So we can move it. We can read an audience read that back. Let's see if y'all have any. You can drop them in the chat.
We know y'all love this book and did the reading. All right.
Hey, Chief Federico, do you want to read this one?
Yeah, I can read this. So from Chief Ade, this means the principle of universal self-determination is of sufficient importance to be applied retroactively in relationships among states and people adopted before the UN Charter 1948. PDF page 22. Yes, so Dr. Haunani-Kay Trask lays out the importance of self-determination, of sovereignty over our lands, over our lives, over our resources, right? But it does get a little bit liberal, right? Like in the demands that as Indigenous people they kind of make to the UN, the United Nations, right? Which is, really this imperialist colonial force that upholds the continued colonialism of Europeans across the world, right? But as Indigenous peoples, right, like they're trying to build kind of a stage where they lay the groundwork for what's occurring across the world, right? And like Dr. Haunani-Kay Trask is not stupid. Like she knows like this United Nations, what it really represents, right? But until we have colonized unity across the world and really build that, which is what we're doing with Black Hammer, and that's why we have our principles, right? Because we're building colonized unity. Then we can like end this colonial structure killing us, genociding us. And I love like how she lays it all out, and lays out like the importance of, self-determination, of sovereignty, which all exists outside of these documents like the United States Constitution, which, gives nothing to Indigenous peoples. Mm-hmm. What do you think, Chief Itza?
Yeah, I unite with what you said, and like the fact that Black Hammer is literally all about self-determination. Like we recognize that we don't have control over our lands, lives, resources, nothing, like nothing at all. So yeah, and I also wanted to unite. I also wanted to outline more specifically that self-determination came before any of these like UN charters, UN documents, or any of these imperial forces. That we don't have to ask. We don't have to ask these we don't have to ask these colonizers. We don't have to beg these colonizers for our liberation. We don't have to beg them for anything at all. Okay, like they created their own destruction when they colonized us, when they pillaged our land, when they murdered our people. Like, you created your own destruction. So yes, Yes, welcome back, Federico.
Yes, welcome back. I'm so sorry about that. But yeah, like I wanted to like read some comments from like our comrades, right, who are talking about this because like they're just laying it out. Yes, we had it before and we'll have it again, unity.
I really want to outline Chief Tere's comment where it says, right, Patrice Lumumba made the same mistake and got killed. Never lean on a colonial institution. Punto. Never, ever, ever. Because we saw how disgusting, like not only the murder of a brilliant African revolutionary, but the way that they, of course, nobody, like no African like revolution deserves to get murdered, but the way that they treated his body after he was deceased lets you know everything that what these colonial institutions think about us. Even after death, they disregard our bodies. They treat us like less than human. So no, we will not be begging them for anything.
Yeah. Their own destruction when they colonized us. Yes, Commander in Chief. Like that's so true, right? Because like, how do they expect like all of this horrific violence to not go like and build up this karmic, like, I'm very much a believer in like what you send into the world will come back, right? And like this is what's been building up for 500-600 years. And there's only so much violence, death, and destruction you can build into the world before it just comes back and obliterates you. And that's what Black Hammer is. I too, oh, from Chief Sante. Okay, read that back, page 26. Do you want to read this, Chief Itza?
Yes. Okay. So our daily existence in the modern world is thus best described not as a struggle for civil rights, but as a struggle against our planned disappearance. Come on, Chief Sante. Yes. I love that. Read that back. Full unity with that. Read that back. Because yeah, it's not even. We recognize that we're not even part of the system. We weren't even like designed, like the system was built on our exploitation. So we're not begging for, oh, please, like, can we please have the right to vote? Like, that's not going to help us in any capacity, because our existence was like planned to be extinct. You know what I'm saying? Like we were not decimated, and that was a problem for them. Okay, so yeah, I fully unite with this. Read that back.
Yes, I want to just unite with that, right? Because like we have to understand the settlers' number one job is to erase the native. They do that through every way possible, right? Through broken treaties, through blood quantum, through ignoring us in every complete way, but then also genociding us, and trafficking our women and killing our women. And then too, like Dr. Haunani-Kay Trask lays this out, like conquest in it of itself is an extermination, not a recognition of Aboriginal peoples and their familiar relationship with the earth, and that just like, yeah, because obviously the colony works to exterminate us as Indigenous peoples.
Yes, full unity. Ooh, we got some more read that backs. We got read that back on page 20. For Indigenous peoples, civil society is in itself a creation of settler colonies. Before the coming of the colonizers, Native society was a familial relationship organized by tribes or chiefdoms in which the necessities of life, land, water, food, collective identity, and support were available to everyone. Ooh, yes, come through, reset. Like, exactly, perfectly outlined. Like, this is how we live. Like, the way we live now is unnatural. It's vile. It's inhumane. It's literally not the way we're supposed to exist. Like, Black Hammer is really recreating an entirely new world where all of those things that Indigenous people the way we used to live is coming back. Like, we recognize that we all deserve our resources, like, and I'm like, I keep expressing this, and I know I'm like preaching to the choir, because we all want our resources. But yeah, just like, this is unnatural. It's not the way we're supposed to live. And that's why we're so like, honestly, that's really why I believe that we are like so ill. That's why we suffer through so many mental differences, like, because we've been so viciously displaced, because we have no like community, and we've been so viciously separated. But that's why I love Black Hammer. It's the work we do is revolutionary, but it's also healing. It's so healing. Like, yeah, it's just so beautiful. Yeah, I'm back.
Land back, period, Chief Itza. Like, and we understand like we existed communally with each other, with the land, with the earth, before colonialism, right? And like these white leftists love to praise, these white communists and like authors like Karl Marx and Lenin, like think that like they were the ones who founded communism, but like we've had such like important socio-economic relationships that existed within harmony of ourselves and the earth and gave us prosperity right before colonialism. And that's what we're returning to build.
Yes, fully unity.
Yeah.
Yes, Benjamin said, white leftists praising these people who ain't ever had a relationship with the land. Punto, Benjamin. There you go. Like, they don't understand what it's like to be connected with the land, and much less people, much less other colonized people. So how are you going to expect me that you want to be the steward of the land? You've already shown me how you steward the land for 600 years. You've committed like ecocide, genocide, and literally war on all natural life for 600 years. Like, nope, it's over for you. Alrighty, so yeah, let's move into our next read that back from Chief Frederico.
Yes, I'm so excited. Let me pull this up in my book. So we're going to start with the conflict over Native sovereignty is not unique to Hawaiians. It is repeated throughout the Pacific Islands. Indeed, anywhere in the world where Native people suffer the yoke of oppression, like Tahitians, Kanaks, Maui, Australian Aborigines, Palestinians, the Kurdish peoples, Tibetans, the Maya, Quechua, and many other indigenous peoples, Native Hawaiians continue to struggle for self-determination and self-preservation as a people. The international issue of indigenous human rights has only now and with great resistance been included in the local Hawaii discussions regarding Hawaiian sovereignty. Ignorance of human rights instruments is but part of the reason why so little attention has been focused on this issue. Refusal by various organizations to understand the human rights dimension and resistance by government agencies and political actors in Hawaii to acknowledge that human rights is an issue in the case of Hawaiians has been very effective in limiting the local discussions to immediate land claims and other concerns. The agenda of Hawaiians, more than a century after the overthrow of our government by the agency of the United States, must include the largest framework of indigenous human rights. Civil rights must be subsumed under human rights. Land claims, language transmission, and monetary compensation must be understood and argued in terms of our human rights as indigenous peoples, rather than merely as citizens of the United States or the state of Hawaii. Given that Hawaiians were once self-governing under the Kingdom of Hawaii, and given that the United States, through its diplomatic and military offices, played a central role in the overthrow of the kingdom, our historical injury involves violations of international law. Thus, the context of the U.S. Constitution is too small a framework in which to argue for sovereignty. An international frame of reference, one that involves universal human rights, must be the context for discussion. Today, in an age of rapacious transnational capitalism, Hawaiians are beginning to think beyond the habitual boundaries of the state of Hawaii, even of the United States. We increasingly assert genealogical claims as children of our mother, Hawaii, and therefore as caretakers of our land. This relationship as indigenous people, as the first nation of Hawaii, places us in a different category from all settlers in Hawaii. It is our duty as Native people to ensure this status for generations to come. Yes, and I just kind of want to unite with this PE and just go into, or just read that back and go into too, like, what we kind of disagree with as part of this as well. But I think it lays out principle of unity number one, in which the colonized proletariat must have dictatorship over their land, their lives, their labor, and their resources. And that's what Dr. Haunani-Kay Trask is arguing for, right? This return of land to the indigenous people so they can be the stewards of that land. And that's what's needed for generations to come. Really to save the planet, right? Because we understand like climate change, is set to like really materially devastate entire swaths of the earth and populations within just, under 10 years. And what that's set to do to the world, like we see these colonizers working to go colonize Mars because they destroyed the planet here. And this is why we say land back to all colonized and oppressed people, right? Like this is why this is our rallying call, and why we're building Hammer City, to give that indigenous relationship back to the land, because that's what is so needed, right? And then I think too, it just lays out that all our problems come from colonialism. That's what she's pinpointing here too, right? Like it's not just Native Hawaiians, that are suffering this, right? It's all indigenous groups across the world, from the United States, from Turtle Island to Pachamama to Asia to Africa, right? All indigenous people suffer under this, and like we're severed from their land, right? Like this is why we have African populations in the United States, right? Like who were severed from their land through chattel slavery, right? Through the transatlantic slave trade. And understanding that, and then also too, like who is the colonized proletariat? She lays that out, It's the ones who have had their land stolen, their labor and resources stolen and exploited. And the only true proletariat are the colonized proletariat, right? Because like we are the most dispossessed, oppressed, incarcerated, and genocided group. And that's why, we're fighting to get this land back. Yeah. So.
Yes, land back, unity with what you laid out. And like Chief Audrey said in the comments, yes, Federico, that paragraph lays out our first and third principles of unity. And I'd also say fourth, since it also outlines who the true proletariat is and who will actually solution colonialism. Got all messed up, says Chief Audrey. Yes, I unite with that. And like Chief, and also another comment I'd like to highlight is Chief when he said, I unite, especially that it is our duty to the land to wage an anti-colonial struggle. Yes, full unity. Like the land is our ancestor. The land is our creator and our life-sustaining entity and deity. Like we don't own the lands. We can't own the land. That is such a colonial thought, that you can own an entire entity that sustains life. Like, you know what I'm saying? And again, colonizers are just like, it's not that they're ignorant, like, you know, like Hawani like was trying to kind of allude to, it's that they know exactly what they're doing. They're just violent. They're like beasts. So yeah, exactly. But I also want to highlight that Black Hammer does not necessarily agree with the fact that we have to go to the UN, that we have to go to the US Constitution and be like, give us civil rights. Like, hey, we deserve to not be genocided. Like, yeah, we're not going to beg any colonial imperialistic institution for what we know is our human, it's like our rights, our essential like rights. Like, we deserve to have control over our land, lives, labor, and resource. Like, that is the bare minimum. Like, you know what I'm saying? That is literally the like foundation, the bare minimum. And we're not going to beg these colonial institutions who are the reason why we don't have these things for them, you know?
Exactly.
Yes.
Full unity, Chief Itza. Yeah, and like that's kind of the liberal part, right? Is like going to the United Nations to beg for human rights. You know, these colonial institutions that have never recognized our humanity, why would they give us human rights? You know, that just does not make sense. It's antithetical, right? And that's not what we're doing, you know, in our anti-colonial struggle and revolution. You know, we're going to build ourselves up and then we're going to show up like China at the table, you know, and be like, no, like, you want to like enact sanctions on us? This is what we're laying out, you know? And then we're also going to lay out your colonial, violent, racist history and your continued genocide, right, of indigenous and colonized peoples across the world. So,
Full unity, like that's it. Like we're gonna just we're not yeah we have a plan to destroy the table. The table's not even gonna exist. Like we're
right.
gonna destroy the table and make it a nice bonfire, and we're all gonna dance around it. Like so yeah, I really want to highlight that it is our birthright. Like Chief Indu said, like it is our birthright to have control over our MFing lives. Like that, you know, and the colonizer like does all these mental gymnastics to try to like move away from that essential facts. Like it is our birthright. Like, and like Chief Indu continues to say, like, it's revolution, not reform, not reform. Nope.
Exactly. And then Chief Oju said, so interesting how colonized people be the only ones saying the land is our mother, but we treat her good. Euros be saying motherland and be mad abusive. Facts. Like, okay, like how first of all, what have they even done in Europe, right? To their own land, continued bombing of just their own land and killing of each other, you know what I mean? And then they go out and do this to the rest of the world. You know, they've showed like how they treat the land, their own land, for hundreds of years, you know, and like even thousands of years, right? And like don't understand that having such an important relationship to the land is so fundamental to existence, to human existence, right? And then Megan also laid out whites who claim to care about the land need to unite under colonized leadership, period. That's why the reparations core is essential for getting on the right side of history for all colonizers. Yes, full unity, because we understand, you know, you come into this world as the colonizer, right? And if you want to get on the right side of history, you want to understand the knowledge that we carry with us, right? And end this oppressive colonial structure, right? Like join our reparations court, wipe blood off your hands, you know, and this continued genocidal hell.
Punto, that's it. Like, and also I want to highlight Sarah's comment. Whites be like, "F you, mom." Like, exactly. They're screaming at Kyle's be screaming at their mothers, like, you know, throwing shit at them, throwing things at them, and I'm like, that's how they treat their biological mothers. How do you think they're treating the earth? Like, come on now. Like, yes. Want to highlight this really important comment by CIC. The United Nations was created to unite European nations together against colonized people's self-determination. The UN can't exist when we're free. That's it. That's
exactly. No, it's gotta go. And then you're sink into the ocean, you know, like. But yeah, like the United Nations, right? Like we understand it's just a colonial imperialist force, created after these world wars to continue, like, you know, oppressing colonized peoples and to keep us in check, right? And like, why do you think they support these continued wars against our land and sanctions? And then you got to go argue against them, you know, like somehow politically and diplomatically to stop being killed and genocided. It just does not make sense.
Exactly. And ready, let me.
Yeah, Black Haunani. So Creator put us in these put us in these lands to care for these lands, and we're simply restoring the order Mother set up from the beginning. Yes, like we're of the land. You know what I mean? That's what we understand as Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island, of Pachamama, right? Is like we are of the land. Like we descend from this land, from ancestors who have been roaming these lands for thousands of years. You know, and it's not like they were just restricted to Turtle Island or the Caribbean or Pachamama, right? Like they're roaming all over, you know, and have always had this natural relationship to the land and have always cared and provided for it, you know. There was none of this nuclear testing to destroy the waters and everything.
Yeah, full unity with that. Also, emphasis, exclamation point, underline Chief Suh's comment. The UN was part of their promise to never attack each other on a large war scale again. Just focus on genociding us. That is it. Exactly.
And that's like, so, you know, like we get called anti-Semitic, right? But like we have to understand, like, what did Europe do after World War II, right? Like they decided all to unite together, right? Because like Germany was bombing the hell out of Britain, right? And destroying other European nations, right? But they decided after World War II it was important to have this unity, right? And that also includes white Jewish people who decided to have this unity with white power, with colonialism, with settler colonialism, right? And that has been their unity since World War II, right? To continue oppressing colonized peoples. And we understand too, like the whole LGBTQ movement, it's all extensions of white power to continue uniting white people, colonizers, against the colonized.
Exactly. And because above everything else, above all these intersectional identities, above their religion, sexuality, gender, blah, 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 that you are still a colonizer. Above everything, you are still a colonizer. You are still a parasite to us, the colonized masses of the world. So I don't care if you're trans, I don't care if you're Jewish, I don't care if you're gay, like you are still white above everything else.
Yeah. UN was, I saw one more, oh, the UN is just the scramble for Africa made institutional. Exactly. That's exactly what it is.
Exactly.
Yes, and then also Comrade Petunia laid out from the banning of our language and death of sovereignty to forcible incorporation in 1959 as a state of the United States, we have lived as subordinated. Exactly, like you know, and that's indigenous peoples across the world who have existed as subordinated peoples to the colonial structure, right, from Asia to Turtle Island. And that's always been our relationship since Europeans left their rock to colonize and destroy the world.
Exactly. Wow, this is a really beautiful discussion, everybody. Yes, amazing. Read that back. So we're going to move into our next fundraising call and see how much we've raised. Awesome. So we have raised $139. Oh my gosh. What?
But
Our
we
goal is
know you can do better than that. Like, do y'all not want liberation? Come on. Let's get it up to 200. Like, you know, like think about the freedom that you're gonna have with Hammer City, right? Like what you're gonna be able to do with like your amazing comrades with other colonized peoples in the world that we're gonna build. Like no cops, no rent, no Rona, no like come on.
Exactly. And let's think about the things that we outlined. Like, we're not going to have poisoned water. You know, shout out to the SciTech committee for the amazing work that they're doing to provide reverse osmosis filters to colonize people. So we have clean water. So you don't have to worry about the poisoning of our water. Ooh, CIC donated $30. Ooh, come on now. Yes. Let's keep these donations coming in. Yes. We want to build this city quick, like SG said. Quick. I'm trying to get to Hammer City ASAP as soon as possible. Like, you know,
first day that we can move in, I'm there. We're there, you know?
Yes. Chief Andre donated $20. Yes. Thank you, Chief Andre. Yes.
Yes. And get those reparations from your colonizer friends.
Yes, get those reparations. So, you know, let them know, yeah, you're cool sometimes, you're okay, but you're still a parasite. You still benefit from my exploitation. If you have white friends. I don't even have any more white friends. Like, that's wild. But anyway, if you still have them, you can let them know. You can let them know that. Yeah, let's highlight Chief Afeni's comment, letting us know their greatest hits. Rape, pillage, murder. Come on, Ecocide. Like,
Right.
exactly. My partner and I have 50 on it. Reset. Come on, fall under a colonized leadership. There you go, Reset. There you go.
And think about how too, like even for colonizers, right? Like how disturbing it must be to exist knowing that like, your legacy is genocide, right? Like and just like what that does to your own like psyche, right? Like and what freeing the land, freeing the people means, you know what I mean? Like because this is just like how do you live like this, you know? This is why we're ending it.
Exactly. So we got $10 from Chief Sunny, the brilliant Chief Sunny. Yes. Thank you so much, Chief Sunny. And
Yeah.
$10 from sorry.
Yeah, $10 from Chief Mace. Yes.
Shout out to Chief Mace, the editor-in-chief, our amazing Black Hammer Times, our Black Hammer Times, really the biggest, baddest anti-colonial news source that is biased towards our liberation. Yes, nothing is objective, because we are all biased. And why not read a news source that literally wants you to be free?
Exactly.
Yes, $15.
$15. Yes. Thank you. Oh my God, Chief Oju with $5. Yes. We getting free, y'all. Like this is great.
And Chief Sus said they only have one white friend. One, I only got one and only one, and he's in the reparations corps. There you go. That's where all though. If you have white friends, that's where they need to be. Like they need to be in the reparations corps, or they're not your friend. To be honest, like how do you have a friend that's okay with your exploitation, with your genocide?
Right. It don't make sense. It don't make sense. But they be using, we know colonizers be using us as props, to like feed their ego and their like, liberalism, like, oh, they want to like show off their friends of color, We've been props since day one.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my, okay, so we just hit over $300. Hey, yes.
Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh, y'all want to be free? Yes, yes. Oh my gosh, amazing, so incredible.
And
Yes.
like you were laying out, Chief Ita, like Black Camera just does so much. Like the fact that we do have our own like anti-colonial news source, that is pumping out this anti-colonial education like to the masses every day. Like, this is the work that you're funding, right? Like to liberate the minds of the people, to liberate colonized peoples from this continued genocidal hell, right? And that's what you're donating to. Like that's where your money is going, to your own liberation.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Megan O'Rourke said, Ali said, bravo, thank you, Ali. Megan O'Rourke said, sending another $20, build Hammer City. There you go. And see, for all the colonizers watching that are like, oh no, I'm poor too, like, I'm oppressed now. Stop it. Like, you're white above everything else. You need to fall behind, you need to fall under the leadership of colonized people, because you clearly don't know how to steward the earth. You clearly don't know how to do anything else aside from violence. So your time's over. Alrighty, let's move it. Alrighty, so we got my Read That Back. We got another Read That Back. This one's short and sweet. This one is on page 43. Alrighty, so because of colonization, the question of who is defined, or because of colonization, the question of who defines what is native, and even who is native, even who is defined as native, has been taken away from native peoples by Western-trained scholars, government officials, and other technicians. This theft in itself testifies to the pervasive power of colonialism and explains why self-identity by natives of who and what they are elicits such strenuous and sometimes vicious denials by the dominant culture. Yes, so I really like this Read That Back because, as an Indigenous person who has been displaced, really just so viciously and violently displaced, the colonizer is the reason I don't have access to my Indigenous language, that I don't live on my ancestral Indigenous land, that I don't have access to the close practices in my Indigenous community. And now the colonizer wants to tell me that I am not Indigenous enough, when they are the reason I don't have access to my Indigenous, my people, that I don't have full access to my people in the way that I should, in the way that we all should. So I really, really like that. And this is really, really outlines our second principle of unity, that we are all equal, that we as colonized people are all equal, that regardless of these divisions that the colonizer wants to set up through blood quantum, through anti-indigeneity, through all these other things, we are still equal. We know who we are, and that makes them angry. We know who we represent, and that makes them viciously angry. So yeah, what do you think about that, Chief Federico?
Yeah, full unity, Chief Itza, because like it is crazy how like the colonizer and colonialism seeks to define who is and what is native, right? What is indigenous to this land, you know? But like we understand through our own history has developed our own indigenous relationship to the land, to our peoples, right? And that, you know, the colonizer loves to use this thing of blood quantum to like say you're not indigenous enough, right? But like indigenous peoples have like mixed throughout thousands of years across these lands. Like, you know, I come from the Taino people of Boriken, right? And like they were a mixed people before colonization and then and then after colonization, right? Like you had West Africans that came in right through the slave trade and then European colonizers and very much a mix, right? But like that does not make those people any less indigenous to that land, right? Like because of this force of colonialism, right? That has, you know, bred people to like be this mix. And you know, it continues through, you know, indigenous continuity of like our food, our songs, our dance, right? And I love how Dr. Haunani-Kay Trask lays that out, right? Like the fact that this colony tries to like, you know, sever people so much that it defines even what is native, just to continue erasing and exterminating indigenous peoples, to continue settler colonial structures.
Exactly. Exactly. Full unity with that. And especially like blood quantum is so vicious. It's so violent. Like it is just so disgusting. Like and like you said, indigenous people, like, yeah, blood quantum is trash, as Shanko, like that's it. That is like, you know, and it's just it's so violent. Like, how are you gonna tell people who and who they are not? You know, like that in itself is genocide. Like the and especially there's this another read that back that I really really like that was essentially talking about language, how English is such a disgusting language. Like you can't describe the beauty and lush and greenery of your land. You can't describe the beautiful interconnectedness of the people of the land of the ecosystem in English. Like English is such an ugly language to me. But yeah, like I just wanted to highlight like blood quantum is a way for colonizers to divide us, to tell us like, oh, you're not indigenous enough, you don't look indigenous enough, like who's the reason that I don't have access to that, you know? It just makes me so angry. Oh my god, blood quantum makes me so viciously angry. It makes me so like, oh, I'm turning red, I'm getting hot. But yeah, yes, full unity with that.
It's, you know, it's so awful because it's used to dispossess indigenous peoples, right? Like, you know, the fact that like there's this whole like, you know, discussion around like whether mestizos are indigenous people. Like, first of all, would such mestizo populations exist if it wasn't due to colonialism, right? And then are they given self-determination over their land and lives throughout colonialism? Are Afro natives given self-determination, right, over their land and lives? No, like, you know, and Dr. Haunani-Kay Trask like goes on later to discuss blood quantum. You know what it really means, like to continue this dispossession of indigenous peoples. Also, that European colonizers can then go in, right, and set up shop and continue this horrific, violent structure. Yes,
Exactly.
G. Anko says the colonizers raping and genociding my people is not a privilege or benefit to then measure how much white blood someone's got. Like colonizers are wild. Literally, it's so ridiculous, you know? And even before like colonialism, right? Like there was, you know, Europeans going to other continents and like, you know, mixing with people there, but like that does not sever you from your people and land, right? Chief Torre says the Hawaiian nation is several times older than even the English language. Europeans do not physically have the words to describe the depth connection we have to the earth. And that's exactly the point, right? Like, because our language was such a reflection of who we are and our spirituality, right? And one of the best ways to sever that is through taking away that language and replacing it with the colonizer's language, right? But now we're using it against them to unite ourselves and our people.
Yes, full unity with that. And I actually remember one of the first like really turning points into my, you know, revolutionary path was watching was watching CIC's video one day, and I think this was before like Oh My Ghazi was like officially like this like, you know, awesome production that it is now. But they were like, why do you speak English? Have you ever thought of that? Why do you speak English? And just sitting with that, I was like, oh my god, like why do I speak English? Like why do I speak Spanish? Like why do I speak these languages? And why don't I speak Zapotec? Why don't I speak my indigenous language? And that's really powerful for me to understand. So let's highlight this Sarah's comment. Oh. Sorry, Sarah's comment. Tainos, were the first indigenous people colonizers have contact with, are not even a federally recognized tribe. Blood quantum, pleading for federal recognition, etc. All trash colonial tactics. Exactly, Sarah.
Yep. And it's like, like the colony loves to say like Taino people are extinct. Like I was like in one of these classes like at university, like where they literally said the Taino people are extinct. And measuring them by blood quantum and everything. And it's like I was sitting there like, what? Like, you know what I mean? Like where do you think these features come from? Like our haircut, like anything, and it's just crazy what they sell to colonizers, right, to continue this structure.
Yes. Can we highlight Chief Ade's comment? Yeah, they said, "Thank you, Chief Federico. Why do we need to accept the colonizers' breakdown of our heritage? It's just another means for them to steal land." There
Right.
you go.
Exactly. No, really trying to tell, like, even African people, like, that they're not African. Like, what? Like, what do you think, like, where do you think African peoples come from? Like, like, they like to use, like, continuously, like, the term, like, black people and stuff to sever, like, Africans from their own connection to spirituality, their culture, and from their land as well. And don't want people to wake up to who they are, right? It's just a continued effort of the colony to continue severing people from who they are in their land. Yes, okay, so I think we can go into. Yeah, so like, can we get Chief Torres read that back up? Yes. So do you want to read this, Chief Itza?
Yeah, I can read this. Alrighty, so read that back, page 50 in the PDF. But if, oh, sorry. But if mass-based corporate tourism is dangerous, so is the dependency on foreign exploitation of the region's resources, from the sea lanes and harbors to the land areas and deep-sea fish. Add to this the first world's interest in the seabed minerals, communication and information control, and extended maritime jurisdictions. The Pacific Islanders appear to be swamped by a global economy in which they are both small and vulnerable, weak, dependent economies, and weak dependent economies are the norm among South Pacific states. On per capita basis, they are the most aid-dependent economies in the world. Whew.
Yes, and it's like so true, like full unity, right? Because like what they do is like work to create colonies that are dependent on the colonizer, right? For like this aid, weaken and destabilize them so much, and then offer these little crumbs and scraps to keep colonized peoples, you know, first subservient to the system, but then also dependent on it in some way, until like colonized peoples then recognize their own power and rise up against the system. And like also the continued like destruction of the lands through like nuclear testing, like especially in the Pacific, nuclear waste, like the radiation, like so awful. And like Dr. Haunani-Kay Trask like lays out, like any material aid to the colonies is an extension of exploitation given the strength of the economic dependency that binds colony to colonizer. Like
Exactly, full unity with that, and it also is literally the manifestation. It's like the material reality of colonialism. Like it is literally, it only is there to steal. It is only there to take. It is only there not only to literally eradicate, like quote unquote, try to eradicate our lives, our cultures, like literally everything about us. But it's now trying to literally dispossess us of the things that we are stewards of. Like you can't take care of the land in the way that we can because you are only there to extract from it. We recognize that we take what we are given and we give back tenfold. And colonizers don't know that. They literally don't know anything about that.
exactly. All right. Yeah. And aid is a tool of abuse that they will use to deny you when you aren't a good slave. We can rely on our captors for nothing. Period. Like, why do we want these crumbs? You know what I mean? Like, they only come from our continued genocide, anyways. All right. And then I'm going to go into my read that back, my last one. So I'm just going to open it up in the book. And I think this just lays out beautifully, too, like, this nature of colonialism. So for peoples who suffer the yoke of imperialism, it is a total system of foreign power in which another culture, people, and way of life penetrate, transform, and come to define the colonized society. The results are always destructive, no matter the praises sung by the colonizer. But the extent of the damage depends on the size of the colony, the power of the colonizing country, and the resistance of the colonized. In the Pacific, tiny islands, large predatory powers, such as the United States, France, Indonesia, and small native populations, all but ensure a colonial stranglehold. Of course, the function of imperialism is exploitation of the colony, its lands and oceans, labor, women, and in the Pacific, its mythic meaning as a South Sea paradise. Moreover, any material aid to the colonies is an extension of exploitation, given to strengthen the economic dependency that binds colony to colonizer, just as teaching natives to speak English, watch television, and consume alcohol creates a clever web of psychological dependency from which the colonized find it nearly impossible to disentangle. Generations become addicted to the worst cultural habits of the colonial society, which increases both ignorance of and alienation from the native culture. Indeed, cultural hegemony is the cutting edge of the imperial enterprise, which explains why cultural nationalism becomes such a crucial native strategy in the battle for decolonization. So land back, I unite with this PE because it lays out, that all our problems do come from colonialism, right? And, here she's calling it imperialism, right? But imperialism is really this beginning stage of colonialism in which, this foreign power works to annex your lands through military power and aggression, and then, colonizes it completely, right? Putting settlers there, creating these structures, right, that are exploitative and extractive of the land. And so she's laying out all these issues that the indigenous Hawaiians face come from this system of colonialism, right? And, this is why indigenous peoples, indigenous peoples of Turtle Island and also in the islands, their women are disappeared at over 10 times the rate, sometimes of other women in the society, right? This whole missing and murdered indigenous women issue, right, is such a huge thing because one, they're trafficked, and then two, killed, right, to continue exterminating the native populations. And then also alcoholism is such a huge issue, but where does this come from? It comes from the colony, right? And so she's laying that out, it all comes from colonialism. And then two, the idea that this cultural nationalism and what we're working to understand within this framework is what we're united here at Black Hammer is on this principle of unity of that all colonized proletariat are equal, right? And that's what unites us in this struggle and in this struggle for land back and ending colonialism. And then two, I like how later on she goes to lay out just the unity that is built up through the Pacific Islands because of this nature of colonialism, right? Because all the people in the Pacific Islands, even though they have their own kind of unique history and culture, are united in this struggle because the colonizer has come in, whether it's the United States or France, right? Who have come in to destroy these lands and colonize them. They've worked together now to kind of unite. We're working to build that up more and more at Black Hammer. And she lays out too, how there's these liberation fronts that are united, in Tahiti and then New Caledonia, right? And they unite, and it's so funny because then the French are stunned by this unity, right? But that's what we're continuing to do. So, what do you think, Chief Itza?
Yes, unity with that, full unity with that. I actually thought this was really powerful, and I really like that she actually explained what imperialism is. A little bit before that, she was racism and colonialism and imperialism, these fancy words made it out of this academia canon. We may not initially have that vocabulary, but we live it every day. We know what it is. We know what imperialism is. It's the theft of our resources and land, and extracting it to the white world. It's imperial and racism. Obviously, we know what that is. And colonialism, we may not know is exactly what it is, but we know exactly how that manifests against us. So I really like that, and I also really united with the fact that towards the end, where she was I just lost my place. Oh my God. Essentially, when she was it's important that we unite, that we recognize our nations, and that we really return and reconnect to our land, cultures, and people. And that's really important. Like, that's a really important part of decolonization, because decolonization is removing everything that is white from the land, from the people, not only from the land, but from the minds of our people. You know, like, we're removing everything that is European. We are cleansing ourselves from this beast and this demon that has inhabited us, you know, this parasite that is in our bodies. So yeah, I really unite with this PE, and I really like this PE. Read that back that you, not PE, this read that back that you picked up.
Yes, land back in full unity. Yep, all these small islands of indigenous people rising up, you know, we're seeing that more and more, you know. That's what we're here at Black Hammer to continue pushing, right? Like understanding that, like, you know, as colonized people, we are all united in this struggle of colonialism. And we love to see it, you know, we love to see colonized peoples uniting together to fight against the colonizer.
Exactly. And I actually want to read Haranan's. I'm self-critical if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, Conrad. But the way that the U.S. maybe, or the way that the U.S. attacked and devastated, then annexed dozens of autonomous nations and manipulated them to be fully economically dependent, totally food dependent, industry dependent, tech dependent on the U.S. Some scholars use the term gaslit. The U.S. gaslit the entire non-white world. There you go. Full unity with that. Like, literally, like, you take everything from us and then you withhold our resources and then give it to us, like, so we're dependent on you for our own resources.
It's so violent. And it's like because I love too like how Dr. Haunani-Kay Trask like lays out like not only are they people of the land, like what differs them from like indigenous peoples of Turtle Island, Pachamama too is like they understand they're people of the sea and how important the Pacific is to them, to you know their life and their sustenance right on these islands, and how violent this colonial structure is that it poisons the Pacific, it poisons their water and you know their way of living in life, and like that's so horrific, right? Because like not only is it destruction of the land, but it's like destruction of their sea in which they come from. Like the Pacific is so important to them because they're part of that, right? And the ocean is part of the land too, exactly, which sustains life across this planet. And like you know the native Hawaiians recognize that, you know, and to have it completely destroyed, you know, for nuclear testing, for more death and destruction, like it's just it's why it's gotta go.
Exactly. I just want to highlight Rohan Hammer's comment. We've been gaslit so much, we're a fire hazard. And we're going to set it all ablaze. We're going to set it all ablaze. We're going to set this entire colonial world ablaze because, again, they created their destruction when they colonized us, when they attempted to destroy us. Like, that was the start of their entire destruction. And we can see it. Like, this colonial system will not be lasting any longer. It is literally falling apart. Like, and as colonized people begin to realize that, as we begin to unite, like, the faster that'll happen. You know, it's already happening, you know, but the quicker we can get to it, like, I want to be free like tomorrow.
Right. White power is just crumbling, you know, in Europe and here in the United States, right? In Canada, like it's all crumbling. So, but yeah, we're looking forward to continuing this book trap, to reading more and just like, you know, having this engaging conversation with you, Chief Itza, and then also with our comrades. Like, oh my God, I just love this. And now we're just like gonna move it to announcements and like talk about what we're doing. Yes, our reparations course. So if you're a colonizer, if you're white, get up in our reparations course to learn from colonized leadership, to understand like our material relationship to the world, right? It's one of two ways. You're either the colonizer or the colonized. That's how the world treats you. And it's starting May 12th. We have an 8-week boot camp, right? So sign up today, blackhammer.org/reparations. Get in there, right? And get this continued political education and understanding of the world from colonized leadership and end the genocide that continues by your hands, right? By the colony, right? All for you as an extension of the state, because white people are an extension of the state, right? To continue sustaining yourself in this system.
So next announcement, we got our super important, super essential Forging the Hammer. That is a mandatory political study. It is, Forging the Hammer, Sunday, May 16th at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So make sure to mark that to your calendars, write that to your notes. I have 4 calendars, to be honest. I have I have 2 whiteboard calendars and 2 electronic calendars. And you know that Forging the Hammer is going to be on all 4 of them. So yeah, make sure to add this to your calendars. I'm back. get to the next announcement.
Yes, and Go Off Sis, which celebrates colonized women and femmes and non-men, right? So tune in. This is every Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with our hosts, Chifa Faney and Comrade Dayo. Like, I just love them so much, and I love what they cover in, Go Off Sis. Like, it's just so fun to watch. So, like, tune in. It's like amazing political education and just such a good time.
Yes, I love gas. I have that the theme song stuck in my head, like I'm about to go off, go off. Yeah, so I always look forward to Fridays to watch those gas episodes. Yes, and lastly, our super important announcement: we are having a new Freedom School this summer. It's called We All Say Lamb Back. It is a virtual class for colonized youth, and it is on Thursday, June 3rd at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can sign up at tinyurl.com/We All Say Lamb Back. And yeah, join our curriculum department. Shout out to all the people in curriculum, really breaking it down, not only for, our colonized babies, our colonized little hammers that really need this education, really need to be forged, but also to the grown hammers, the adult hammers that, sometimes have difficulty learning things, may have not, like traditional education may not be super accessible to them. And, shout out to the curriculum department for making education super accessible. Yeah, so shout out to them.
Yes, and continue with us next week, this same time, 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, for part 2, which we'll be delving in more. And I'm just so excited to continue this conversation.
Yes, me too. I'm excited to see what we're going to cover next week. I'm excited to see how this conversation continues to develop. Yeah, we did so amazing. And alrighty, so I just drum roll. We raised $343. Oh my gosh. $343 towards Hammer City. Like, I think that buys like a generator, I'm pretty sure, like a solar panel. Yeah, SG and CIC really laid that out at the last BookTrap, so make sure to watch that if you haven't watched it already. So I'm so excited. I'm so excited. Thank you all for coming. Like, I'm so excited to continue to develop this conversation. This conversation was so beautiful and brilliant with you, Chief Federico, and also all of our amazing comrades in the comments. Like, I've learned so much. So thank you everybody for coming. And we're gonna end it with a nice strong lamb back. So Chief Federico, if we could both say lamb back.
Lamb back.